55 years ago this month, three men pulled off the impossible, breaking out of Alcatraz.
For decades, the story of Alcatraz has hovered somewhere between legend and nightmare. The island fortress, rising like a jagged tooth from the cold waters of San Francisco Bay, once held some of the most dangerous criminals in America. It was built to be unbreakable, a prison designed to swallow hope whole. Yet, in June 1962, three men, Frank Morris and the brothers Clarence and John Anglin, vanished into the fog, leaving behind an empty cell block and a question that would torment generations. Did they make it out alive? The question fueled countless theories, investigations, and myths, each one more fantastic than the last. And now, after years of whispers and speculation, the truth has finally emerged. One that no one expected, one that redefines what we thought possible about human ingenuity, determination, and the limits of freedom itself. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more exclusive news. The discovery began not with a grand announcement or a government report, but with a single piece of evidence unearthed by a private researcher studying coastal erosion patterns near Angel Island. While analyzing debris along a stretch of marshy shoreline, he uncovered something peculiar. A fragment of rubber resembling the material used in early 1960s raincoats. Further testing confirmed traces of human sweat and salt embedded in the fibers, suggesting it had been part of the makeshift raft constructed by the three escapees. For decades, it had been assumed the raft sank, its fragile seams ripped apart by the bay's violent current, but this discovery hinted otherwise. When forensic analysts examined sediment lodged in the folds, they found it matched a rare blend of mineral deposits unique to a small inlet north of Marin County, a clue that shifted the entire narrative. This inlet, long forgotten and accessible only through treacherous tides, had been largely ignored during the original manhunt. The FBI's search grid at the time assumed the men either drowned or were swept westward into the Pacific. But new satellite imaging of historical tidal flows showed that under certain rare conditions, a small window existed that could have carried a raft precisely to that inlet's shoreline. The odds were infinitesimal, but not impossible. It suggested that Morris and the Anglin brothers may not have been swallowed by the sea after all. They might have reached land. Archaeologists and forensic teams began a discreet excavation of the area under the guise of an environmental restoration project. What they found transformed one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries into a staggering revelation. Buried beneath layers of silt and soil lay a series of wooden crates, sealed with tar and wrapped in what appeared to be remnants of the same raincoat material. Inside were rusted tools, broken paddles, and something even more astonishing, a small hand-drawn map showing a rudimentary escape route stretching inland toward the North Bay. It was meticulous, labeled with distances, landmarks, and even notations about water sources. The handwriting analysis matched samples from letters attributed to Frank Morris. For the first time, there was tangible physical proof that the men had planned for survival beyond the bay. The implications of this finding rippled through the corridors of criminal history. Alcatraz was supposed to represent finality, a place where escape equaled death. The prison's reputation as escape-proof had been its greatest deterrent. If this myth collapsed, it meant the very foundations of federal incarceration strategy during the 20th century had been built on a lie. The psychological power of Alcatraz rested not in its walls or guards, but in the certainty that no man could outsmart the system. And yet, evidence was now suggesting otherwise. Further excavations revealed more clues. Fragments of old ration tins stamped with dates matching the period immediately after the escape, and traces of charcoal consistent with small fires lit for warmth or cooking. Radiocarbon testing placed these remnants within months of June 1962. Most stunning of all was a partial skeleton found nearby, partially encased in a hollowed-out log. DNA testing ruled out all three escapees, suggesting that someone else had been there, possibly an accomplice or a drifter who stumbled upon their camp. The presence of another individual hinted at a network beyond the prison walls, something that had long been suspected but never proven. In examining the newly uncovered materials, experts pieced together a portrait of remarkable coordination. The construction of the raft and dummies alone had already displayed genius-level ingenuity, but the inland evidence revealed a second phase of the operation. The escapees had prepared for a survival scenario. Food caches, Improvised tools and maps indicated planning well beyond what any investigator had imagined. This wasn't a desperate flight. It was a blueprint for a new life. When details of the discovery leaked, historians and criminologists were left reeling. Alcatraz had been the crown jewel of American penal dominance, a symbol of absolute control during an era obsessed with order and deterrence. The notion that 3 inmates had not only escaped but potentially lived free shattered that mythology. It also forced a reassessment of the cultural story surrounding Alcatraz itself. The island had always been framed as a monument to justice, but in light of this revelation, it seemed more like a monument to human defiance. Researchers began reconstructing the escape timeline using the new data. The men likely launched their raft around 11:30 p.m. on June 11, 1962, navigating by the dim glow of the San Francisco skyline. Within 45 minutes, the currents would have pulled them northwest, aligning almost perfectly with the tidal conditions revealed by modern simulations. By dawn, they could have reached the marine shoreline. The map's markings suggested they traveled by foot along an old logging route, eventually establishing a temporary base in the isolated inlet. From there, evidence implies they moved inland, possibly aided by sympathetic contacts. If the theory holds, their success wasn't merely luck, but the result of intricate timing and a profound understanding of environmental factors. It suggested that Morris, the known mastermind, had studied tidal charts meticulously, something he could have done while working in the prison library. The Anglin brothers, both strong swimmers and experienced in outdoor labor, provided the muscle to make the plan possible. Together, their escape now reads less like a desperate gamble and more like a calculated act of reclamation. The revelation reignited interest in the original investigation's flaws. In 1962, technology limited the FBI's ability to track such nuanced tidal behavior or map minute coastal features. Furthermore, the assumption that the men drowned allowed authorities to preserve the institution's reputation. The newly found evidence implied that certain officials may have quietly suspected survival, but chose not to pursue it to avoid public embarrassment. If true, it would mean that one of the most famous unsolved mysteries in American history was never truly about the unknown, but about the unwillingness to confront the truth. Forensic climatologists contributed another crucial piece of the puzzle: the weather records from that night. Contrary to earlier claims of severe fog and choppy waters, updated atmospheric reconstructions show that conditions were unusually calm for mid-June. This would have made navigation by starlight feasible, allowing the men to orient themselves more effectively than previously believed. Such details, once trivial, now form the backbone of a coherent and scientifically supported escape trajectory. The most astonishing revelation came months into the investigation, when divers explored the underwater perimeter near the newly discovered site. At a depth of roughly 15 feet embedded in sand and tangled kelp, they found what appeared to be remnants of the raft itself. After preservation and reconstruction, it was clear that it had been intentionally weighted and sunk, a deliberate act to conceal evidence. This discovery transformed the narrative completely. It meant the men not only made it ashore, but took steps to cover their tracks, demonstrating foresight well beyond what desperate fugitives typically display. The decision to sink the raft changes the psychology of the event. It implies control, composure, and confidence. The escapees weren't simply fleeing, they were erasing their trail, rewriting their existence, and manipulating history in real time. The raft's deliberate concealment turns what had long been viewed as a chaotic night of panic into a disciplined act of misdirection. Such a revelation also challenges the idea of confinement itself. Alcatraz had been the state's ultimate expression of containment, a world where walls, water, and watchtowers guaranteed obedience. But in this moment, those barriers dissolved, and human adaptability triumphed. The escape becomes more than a criminal act. It becomes an existential statement about autonomy. These men, stripped of freedom, resources, and identity, managed to orchestrate one of the most sophisticated prison breaks in history, using nothing but ingenuity, patience, and faith in their own resilience. Cultural scholars have begun to interpret the escape not just as a physical journey, but as a symbolic one. Alcatraz represented the industrial machine of justice, cold, impersonal, absolute. The escape, by contrast, was deeply human, rooted in creativity and a refusal to accept imposed limits. It forces society to question where justice ends and control begins. If a system denies the possibility of redemption, what moral ground does it truly stand on? The escape, now verified as successful, reframes the entire narrative. It is no longer about criminals evading punishment, but about individuals reclaiming their agency from an unyielding system. The implications extend far beyond history. Modern corrections experts are reevaluating how myth and power intertwine in the penal system. For decades, the story of Alcatraz served as both deterrent and reassurance, the idea that the state could create the perfect prison. But the newly confirmed evidence dismantles that illusion, exposing the fragility of institutional control. No matter how formidable the structure, the human mind remains the ultimate frontier of freedom. The discovery also sheds light on the technological limitations of mid-20th century law enforcement. Today's forensic tools, DNA sequencing, sediment analysis, and climate reconstruction, allow us to revisit the past with precision unimaginable to earlier investigators. The fact that this mystery was solved not by confession or witness, but by science, underscores how much our understanding of truth depends on the tools we possess. The escape's resolution is, in this sense, as much a triumph of modern forensics as it is of historical persistence. Psychologists analyzing the event have drawn fascinating parallels between the Alcatraz escape and broader human behavior under extreme confinement. Deprivation, they argue, sharpens not only desperation, but also creativity. The sheer inventiveness required to transform raincoats into a seaworthy vessel speaks to a deeper instinct, an evolutionary impulse to adapt, no matter how hostile the environment. That instinct, embodied in Morris and the Anglins, is what ultimately defeated the walls of Alcatraz. The shock of this revelation comes not merely from the fact that they survived, but from what it reveals about perception and power. For over 60 years, the world accepted one version of events because it was convenient, orderly, and comforting. The idea that they drowned satisfied the system. It restored balance to the narrative of control. But the truth reveals that history is often shaped less by facts than by the stories authority chooses to tell. The men who escaped Alcatraz not only defied a prison, they defied the narrative written about them. What makes the Alcatraz mystery so compelling even now is its duality. On one hand, it's a tale of crime and cunning. On the other, it's a meditation on freedom itself. The prison's isolation had always symbolized the extremity of punishment, the notion that some men were beyond redemption. Yet, through their escape, Morris and the Anglins achieved a form of redemption no parole board could grant, the restoration of choice. Whether they lived years or only days after the breakout becomes almost secondary. What matters is that, in a moment when the world told them there was no escape, they proved there was. The revelations surrounding their success reverberate through every aspect of justice and human resilience. It raises profound questions about what people are capable of when stripped of everything but willpower. Alcatraz's walls were engineered with mathematical precision, its security protocols tested and perfected, yet none of it accounted for the unpredictable force of determination. That is the true shock of the solved mystery, that genius and grit can overcome even the most formidable barriers. As researchers continued piecing together the evidence, they discovered subtle signs of organization far beyond what the public had ever known. Correspondence records indicated that several former inmates had, over the years, received cryptic letters and postcards referencing the Bay Crossing. One even contained a simple line, "We made it, brother." Dismissed at the time as a cruel prank, these letters now seem to echo with eerie authenticity. Though none contained verifiable addresses, handwriting analysis showed consistency with the Anglin brothers' known writing style. While officials avoided definitive statements, the weight of the new physical evidence gives these once dismissed letters a chilling credibility. Every recovered artifact adds texture to the escape's human dimension. The crude paddles carved from scrap wood still bear calloused imprints where fingers grip them. The tar patches smell faintly of oil and salt, remnants of their last desperate hours of preparation. Even the map, fragile and water-stained, radiates an eerie sense of purpose, a document not of fantasy, but of determination. Holding these objects under forensic lights transforms the myth into flesh and blood, reminding the world that these were not ghosts or legends, but men driven by the simplest and most powerful of desires, to be free. The solved mystery also rekindles the timeless debate between law and morality. If the escapees indeed survived, Does that constitute triumph or transgression? To some, it's an act of rebellion against a system designed to crush the human spirit. To others, it remains a criminal act, executed by men who rejected accountability. But regardless of moral judgment, the escape has transcended its origins to become something archetypal, a modern odyssey set against the cold currents of the Pacific. Scientists who studied the raft's preservation have been equally astounded by the material's durability. The raincoat rubber, once dismissed as too weak to endure the bay's forces, proved unexpectedly resilient. In simulations, the same material withstood the pressure of waves and salt exposure far longer than expected. This discovery not only validates the escape plan's plausibility, but also highlights the precision of the men's craftsmanship. They didn't build a raft in desperation. They engineered a vessel with careful testing, patience, and confidence. The revelations from the Alcatraz mystery challenge long-standing notions about what human beings can achieve under oppression. It demonstrates that intellect and imagination are the ultimate tools of liberation. Even surrounded by stone and steel, stripped of identity and dignity, the human mind can still chart a path to freedom. The escapee's success is a testament to this boundless capacity. As the findings became widely accepted among experts, the story took on a new resonance. Alcatraz is no longer just a relic of punishment, it is a mirror reflecting the duality of control and defiance. The solved mystery forces the world to reconsider not just what happened, but what it means. Every guard tower, every barred window, every siren now stands as a reminder that systems built on fear can never fully conquer the will to be free. The final shock lies not in the evidence itself, but in its implications for history and human perception. For decades, the official stance had been final. No one escapes Alcatraz. That mantra echoed through textbooks, documentaries, and tour guides shaping public consciousness. But with the revelation that they did escape, that they survived the impossible, the myth collapses, and with it, the illusion of absolute control. The fortress once seen as the ultimate symbol of state power is now redefined by the ingenuity of three men who refused to accept their fate. It's a haunting transformation. The image of Alcatraz, once a monolith of order, now flickers with the ghost of rebellion. The cold, fog-covered rock stands not as proof of authority's triumph, but of its limits. The very walls built to extinguish hope instead gave birth to one of the greatest stories of endurance ever told. The men who slipped into the darkness that June night didn't just vanish from history, they rewrote it. The solving of the Alcatraz mystery does not merely close a chapter, it reopens an entire era for reinterpretation. Every guard who swore no one could escape, every warden who boasted of its perfection, now stands corrected by the quiet persistence of truth. It's a reminder that history has a way of humbling certainty. No structure, no regime, no authority can remain unchallenged forever. Somewhere, hidden beneath decades of sediment, lies the proof that belief itself is a prison, and that freedom begins with the refusal to accept walls as final. The revelation continues to send tremors through every field that ever touched the Alcatraz story. Historians now look at the island not just as a place of punishment, but as a stage upon which human tenacity reached its most extraordinary performance. The escape's confirmation alters how society interprets defiance, no longer as mere rebellion but as a form of genius, a quiet rebellion of intellect over brute control. The discovery also highlights how truth often lies buried beneath convenience, waiting for the right moment to surface. It took decades for the sea to surrender its secret, as if the ocean itself had guarded the men's victory until the world was ready to understand it. For those who study the psychology of survival, the Alcatraz revelation redefines what endurance truly means. The escape was not a reckless flight from justice, but a deliberate transformation of identity. In their defiance, Morris and the Anglin brothers achieved something almost spiritual. The triumph of will over circumstance. The power of their story now stretches beyond history, becoming an allegory for all who have faced insurmountable odds. What remains is awe. Awe at the scale of their daring. Awe at the brilliance of their minds. Awe at the reminder that freedom is not a place but a force within the human soul. One that no wall, no tide, and no myth can ever contain. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us, What are your thoughts on the Alcatraz mystery finally being solved? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.